Hey folks, Pokey here. This is an excerpt from our weekly podcast. We do an episode every week, and if you want to listen, head over to biomassed.com. So moving along to some more gaming-related news. So probably the biggest topic that we're going to have for this week is, of course, regarding CCP Games' Project Nova, the alpha that was supposed to be starting in November. So what happened is that it was planned to have a closed invite-only alpha starting in November. You could sign up. We pushed that pretty hard. So November 30th came with no news, and CCP released a letter. It went out via email and on other media outlets, basically saying, hey, listen guys, we were realizing from the feedback that we're getting from kind of our people who play the demo at Vegas and their impressions, and also some player studies that we have done in internally and externally, that the game currently doesn't quite do enough in order to reach for the end goal that we have for the project. The end goal being, of course, the one universe, one war mantra, which is kind of this idea of having an FPS game set in the New Eden universe, and that it would be connected to EVE Online in one form or another. And they had talked about this probably maybe 2 or 3 times in the past, specifically for Project Nova, and how they wanted to do this, and how they were going to start with kind of a thematic link and then go to a social and then an economic and then something else. And that they were really trying to stick to keeping it self-contained initially in order to kind of make sure they really locked in a really solid core FPS experience, and then kind of diving into linking the games together. And this comes off of the back of the development for Dust 514, where there was a heavy emphasis on the EVE link, and presumably the core experience suffered because of it, because there's kind of a lack of focus. But they said, this is kind of what we want. We want this game to feel like it's part of the New Eden universe, and we feel that we have not done enough to achieve that goal. And as such, they are delaying the closed alpha for an unknown amount of time, basically saying, like, what, we don't want to rush forward with this. We are going to take our time with it. So we're going to delay the alpha and kind of take a step back and look at what they've done, look at what people are asking for, and kind of answering some hard questions regarding, how do we make this feel unique? How do we make it feel interesting? And how do we make it feel part of, this universe that we want to be part of? And that they've probably been a little overly conservative in trying to just stay very self-contained, and they might have to kind of branch out from there. And to be clear, the statement came out, but then CCP Rattati and then later CCP Dopamine, who is the community manager, popped into the Dust Veteran Discord and kind of clarified a few things, and I just kind of wanted to mirror some of that here. There was a phrase in the letter that came out saying back to the drawing board, and a lot of people took that as, oh god, they're restarting everything again, this is going to be terrible. They wanted to clarify by saying it's not a restart. Back to the drawing board, meaning that we're just trying to take a step back, and look at what we've done and make sure that we are going on the correct course. Do we have the correct scope? Are we going the right direction with it? And then making some changes. It's not like a full restart of the project. He said that the core FPS mechanics are really solid. I would agree. It feels and shoots and feels really good. And that the AI for the PvE, because there's some issues with how it's presenting, but the brain behind the AI is also really solid. So they're keeping a lot of those really core, large, systems, but they are going to kind of look at how they are presenting the universe. Like, do the environments look like they're part of New Eden? Do they make you feel like you're part of New Eden? Is what you're doing have meaning? Does it feel important? Does it have persistency? That sort of thing. That's what they're really focusing on. And that, of course, will come with some rework, I imagine, with some of the stuff they've been talking about. But that's really what they're focusing on. But the game is not being restarted. It's not being canceled. I just kind of want to make sure that was really clear, because he did kind of come in. And when I read the letter, I had a pretty good feeling that that's what they meant, but the wording was absolutely terrible in how they presented it. And so they came in and clarified. So I kind of wanted to say that to you guys here. But yeah, so, it wasn't explicitly stated that, hey, we're adding an EVE link earlier than expected. That's just kind of my interpretation of it. But when they say our end goal is one universe, one war, and we're doing more to reach that goal now, that's kind of where I go with it. So that was kind of my thought on it. But Jay, I kind of want to get your thoughts because I know you've kind of had a similar opinion that the game hadn't done enough to set itself apart from other offerings, and that this could potentially kind of fix part of that issue. So, what do you think about this?
When I caught the note in my email, I'm on the subscribe list and all that kind of good stuff. I for maybe the briefest of moment, literally just a couple seconds, I was like, CCP's they're ready to set the dumpster on fire again. But in all fairness, though, I actually think this is probably a smart move on their part. Like if you're not ready, don't put the game out. Don't put it out in a conditioner state where you can't control the narrative. Okay, so I think that is a smart move on their part. I've been involved in some alphas before, and they're kind of they're in a weird I don't know what I couldn't tell you what the technical term is anymore, because from what I've seen with alphas and all the way from super early pre-releases, which I would call alphas in many ways, from Steam or whatever, or even other like larger games that I've had access to. You expect to be able to see basically the skeleton of the game, basically the framework of the game. And that's also where they do a lot of, different, experiments with what, for lack of a better term, the sandbox, or like the environment of the play environment of the game. But there's supposed to be a skeleton there where you can kind of see this is the game. It is a good sketch of the game, right? And then beta is generally much more refined. And I would argue in recent years, beta has come closer to mean this is what we are releasing, and now we're trying to tune numbers and polish things. So I think their gap is very subjective based on the developer. That being said, if you want to control the narrative about your game, you control what people see on it, right? For good or bad. And I think this is a good move. I think this is a smart move. If the game wasn't where they wanted it to be, they have to figure out what are they going to get out of the release into alpha. What is the level of feedback they're going to get? Are they going to get feedback on the right things in order for them to continue to move forward with their vision for the game? Now, you'll notice, and I think Pokey read it off for a little while ago, it's not like they just have 20 or 30 people in-house that are working on the game, like hop on to play PCs and like test it out with each other. They actually hire companies that supply people, like professional testers that come in, or you have your own in-house testing staff, probably both. And they give very, very detailed test reports on these. And if you're a casual gamer and you've ever thought you want to be a tester, and it sounds like a cool gig, it probably is sometimes. But try to figure out where the invisible geometry that kills players is on one corner of a map of one level of a game for like 9 straight hours, and get video documentation of it down to XY axis in the wireframe model. Like, that shit's tedious. And then they write very professional technical documents that support this. So what this tells me is a couple things. I believe him that the shooter mechanic is good. Everybody that I've talked to laid hands on the shooting, said the shooting was, quote unquote, felt good. Generally was good. But it was also extremely simple. Very, very, very vanilla. And there was not a lot that they really unveiled, I think, at Vegas, based on what I saw. It was pretty, bare bones is not the right word, but it was very, very vanilla. And you absolutely could not understand what else was going on outside of the game or the other structures of the game. That also wasn't the point of the demonstration either. So, based on what Pokey was saying, and we had a pretty couple healthy roundtables on this a few weeks back. My overarching concern for their game is, if they think they're going to compete with the incredibly saturated first-person shooter market, just because it says the word Eve on it, they're crazy. Like, they have to have rock-solid gameplay. If you think about it, great gameplay mechanics in a first-person shooter game, that is the entry point. Like if you think about it, like think of all the games when you think of first-person shooter games that larger groups of people play. There is none of them that says, this handle's kind of fucked up, like it doesn't feel good when it shoots, or like the movement's kind of wonky. There's none of that. Like that is the price of entry to even get into the playing field. And then once you get on that playing field, then you've got to have something that is markedly different than everybody else. Otherwise, you will not get the time of day from the vast majority of gamers out there. And this is kind of what we were talking to Ripley and Foe and those guys we brought on. And my point to them was, if I knew nothing about Dust 514 and I knew nothing about Eve, and you showed me this, like, what's my logical reaction to it? I'd be like, and what else is going on with this? Otherwise, yes, that's cool, but I will continue to play these other 12 games that are probably as good or better, at the baseline shooting, that they have something I'm decidedly interested in, or there's something about them, the setting of it I like, or the lore, or the tone, or whatever it is. You gotta bring something else to the table. Now, like I said, the mechanics, that is the cost of entry into the game, but there's got to be something else, and I hope that they're working on it, and it sounds like they are. I mean, from what you're telling me, Pokey. So I think this is a good move. Long-winded way of saying it's a good move. And honestly, I don't know of too many times when games were delayed, when somebody said, "Hey, it's not ready," and they held on to it, that it didn't turn out I suspect probably better than if they had showed it to you early when you wanted it, the customer wanted it. So I don't know. I think it's an okay thing. Now, what I'm interested to see is what their level of communication is going forward after this. If they go into fucking radio listing silence for 6 months, that's a problem.
No, I would agree, and I think that's they got pretty quiet, leading up to Vegas, and that's usually common before a quote unquote release of something. But at this point, it's like your community really needs you to kind of be engaged, even if you pop in for like 5 minutes every couple days and just like shoot the shit, drop a little screenshot, something like that. People eat that shit up. That goes a long way, and I think that I honestly feels like game developers have this expectation that people want this like giant dev blog thing all the time. I'm like, yeah, they just want to know that you're still there and actually working on it, and recognize that the players still exist and are curious. So I do hope that they can actually maintain a reasonable level of communication moving forward with this.
I think one of the two sharpest things I saw in terms of like exchange with the community was actually when Warhammer 40K was putting out their FPS game, which is strikingly a lot like Dust, by the way, since it was actually being, for the longest time, the EP was actually a guy originally who helped put Dust together. Before him, the guy before him, Miguel Cazaron, they were actually doing like, I think weekly, 30-minute streams where they would put out, and they would just literally go through forums or Twitch questions, say everybody's, hey, this week we're going to talk a little bit about this weapon, or this week we're going to talk a little bit about this environment or this type of vehicle. They pick a thing, talk about that one very specific thing for a few minutes, and then they would just answer questions. And it was probably about 30 minutes. Harebrained Schemes was genius at this. They were doing the same thing with a little bit more long form, almost like podcast or Twitch stream style things every few weeks, probably about every month. And they were also really good at releasing really well crafted updates about once a month ish. So they had a really good cadence with this, and they were also pretty okay with like their devs coming on shows like ours. So there's people out there that do this, and it's not a huge investment if you're the game development company, but I think you have to be extremely confident in what you're doing and have a little bit of freedom from the mothership to be able to do that kind of thing. And I'm pretty sure that those two things are kind of tough to come by together.
Yeah, especially since they have a community manager at this point. I assume in prep for the alpha that isn't happening now. I mean, it's like that's his job is to communicate with the community. So I mean, I do hope that we see more of CCP Dopamine and hopefully CCP Rattati, though I always worry when he talks, as he's so terrible at communicating his actual ideas that it worries me. But I do hope we see more of that, because it is really important, especially when something like this happens. You had a bunch of anticipation leading up to it. It's like, just throw us a bone, just really, it's really important, and I do hope that they recognize that.
Yeah, I think it would be pretty cool. Like, I think with the advent of a guy like CCP Dopamine, I think it's actually a pretty good idea that they should really start considering maybe a more interactive style. I don't mean just on the forum. I mean maybe something more broadband. I'm a big fan of them hopping on a Twitch stream or something like that, or coming onto a couple different shows, something a little bit more interactive where people could talk to him in like bite-sized chunks, like 30-minute discussions, that kind of thing, like every couple of weeks. I think that goes a long way in terms of just engaging folks. So, and let's also be realistic. There's only so much you can do with a game that's like, not even out in alpha, right? There's only so much you can really talk about too. So you can very quickly kind of run the balance of not having a lot to engage on, because it's not like you can show like fresh hot gameplay footage like every week either.
Yeah, you're certainly more limited. I mean, it was nice that when Rashadi popped in, I think it was yesterday, he was kind of showing like already like, here are some of the things we're looking to change, and here's like some prototypes we're working on. That was really good. That went a long way, and people received that pretty well. So I mean, yeah, you can't do a lot, but just bits and pieces. Like I said, even that helps. I mean, obviously you can't do full gameplay, stuff, much of that, but yeah, no, I hope that they can reach a balance of sorts. But yeah, kind of rolling back to the issue at hand, though, with the delay, just kind of my thoughts on it. I was talking to Olivia about it, and it was kind of like, depends on what you're coming to this game to play, I think. And for me, what I usually find compelling in a game like this is usually progression and character customization. And I don't mean just, space Barbies. I mean like in-depth fitting, customizing how my character plays and that sort of thing. And that's really what drew me to Dust. I really liked that sort of gameplay. It was never the Eve Link for me. That was kind of it's cool. It was a neat idea, but it was the actual like customization, long-term progression, that sort of thing. That was me personally. And it's going to be different for everyone. The issue is that you see, I believe that Nova will probably have a really good customization and progression, just because I've seen what they've done before. They had a pretty good formula. I would love to see more of that. The issue is that you look at any game out there, look at Destiny, look at Anthem, they all say, we have a deep customization and progression system. Everyone says that has any RPG elements in their game. Regardless of what degree of how good it is, that's what they all say. So when I hear that, I kind of go, okay, and I actually want to see what they've got. The problem is that if that's what they're banking off of, hey, we've got PvE and we've got PvP at the same time, well, okay, a couple games have that, or we have deep customization and progression. Well, yeah, a bunch of games say they have that too. I think for a big thing for them is that even if you've got really good features, you need something that's marketable, something you can actually say is like, this is truly unique and it's easy to explain. And, for just low-hanging fruit, I mean, it's not low-hanging, but just you say, hey, it's connected to EVE Online because this, and this. No other game can say those words, and that's what it makes it marketable. And even if that's not the reason people actually stick around, they're sticking around for the other stuff, the social, whatever. That gets them in the door because that draws interest and makes it like a true unique selling feature. And I think that's really critical for them right now. And that's definitely what they were missing. Just from like a public perspective of coming in not knowing anything, what's going to make me give a shit about this game compared to something else? Once they get in the door, then whatever, the sky's the limit. You can have all kinds of stuff. I think they need to elaborate on that stuff as well, but I think for making this thing truly stand out, they need something else besides solid FPS mechanics. Because you're right, Jay, like that is the bare minimum entry, is the game has to shoot and feel good. Well, yeah, it's a shooter, obviously. It needs more than that, and I think they're kind of realizing, unfortunately, they realized at the last second, maybe we should actually take a step back and take a look at this and see if we are actually going to be able to produce a product that will be successful. And so it's absolutely shitty that this thing got delayed, and particularly that it got communicated like on the last day of November, and that was kind of the time frame they gave for the alpha. That was terrible. And they've even admitted, yeah, we should have done better on that. Cool, fine, I get it. But it's overall, I think it will probably be a good thing because it's forced them to kind of ask some hard questions of themselves and go, we are confident in what we're doing, but are we doing enough? Are we going the right direction? Do we have the right scope? And I think that's probably going to be a positive in the long run. I'd love to see what direction they go, and that's kind of going back to the communication thing. But overall, I think that them kind of pumping the brakes a little bit and taking a look at it is probably going to be a positive, even if the way it rolled out, even if not getting it to players' hands sooner than than we had hoped, it's probably a good thing. Hopefully, so I'm taking it as a positive, despite the negative way it was rolled out. But we'll see. I mean, CCP, they have a colorful history, but I do hope that they can be successful with this because from what I've seen, it's a really good start, and I want to see it be successful because there is a lot of good DNA in there, and you don't tend to get that in other games. So, fingers crossed, but we'll see how it goes, and we'll of course keep you posted here.
Yeah, real quick, a couple things I want to just touch on that you said. I think that kind of caught my eye a little bit was the kind of the concept of it was you said something I was very interested in. Now I'm absolutely blanking my mind out on it. Oh my God, this is making for great radio, by the way. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm not going to ask you to repeat any of that. It was a desperate question that I wanted to ask you while you were talking, and I'm totally spacing right now. Again, we're not going to really edit this out because we don't really.
No, that's a lot of work.
Editing. This, as we say, we do it live. So hey, it's kind of cool.
It's recorded and basically live because I
got it.
Go.
Okay, so here's my question: at what point do you think they realized in the development studio that they hadn't actually talked about anything like missions or campaign or anything other than go to a lobby, click fight, and then get in? Because that's what I think has happened.
That's a good question because I mean it was because I was expecting probably the second half of November. They probably are not going to roll this thing out like a week after the presentation. So the fact that they were going oh shit, I almost feel like it was probably closer to the last week, and they're we're not comfortable with moving forward, so we better say something before the end of the month. We'll do it on Friday. But yeah, I'm thinking it was probably later in the month, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think. Well, and by the way, I know I'm kind of joking about it, but it honestly feels like that. When I heard the descriptions coming out of Vegas, from the roundtable you guys had with the CCP staff, and really a lot of your guys' comments that were there, and had some interactions with the developers, that I couldn't really get a sense of what the game was about, other than, hey, we have a space where you can shoot at each other. So that was honestly one of the biggest, red flags for lack of better term. And I think that's probably being a little too harsh, but that's what I just couldn't get any sense of what the game was about. And if all you're going to do is have basically a lobby shooter, I don't know. Good luck competing with Call of Duty,
Yeah, I mean, it's they have the narrative, of the PvE is Sancha are attacking, you're protecting ships from being captured. Cool. But they kind of wanted to have this, God, I hate to say it, Dark Souls or Destiny style, where the lore is kind of hidden and you kind of got to dig for it. Sure, but you still need the hook of exactly why you're there. I would never say you need a campaign. I don't think that's necessary.
I don't think that's the right term either. But I do think you need a framework, some kind of game and narrative or store, or some kind of framework that you're working around. And I think that's kind of what I was driving at with the alpha comment. You actually see that in an alpha. You see what that framework is, and that doesn't mean it may not change a lot. And often it does change, and sometimes fairly significantly. But you do see some of that framework. The alpha is predominantly a technical activity, not so much of a gameplay story unveiling. And I don't think anybody was thinking we need these massive cutscene, campaign mode activities. I don't think that's what people were going for. It'd be kind of cool if they did, as they say, but I don't think anybody's expecting that. But you have to have something. And by the way, your point about customization and things like that, that's a big thing that I get into as well in these games is how much can I craft, tweak, and shape what my guy, my character can look like, do, and how does he feel in the game, and how people and how things react to his abilities in the game. That's one of the biggest draws to these kind of things. And like I said, there's a lot of competition in that space. I'm very interested in see what Anthem does. I think it's going to be a little bit more Monster Hunter World than Destiny, but just looking at that 40-minute stream they did on character customization, holy beeswax! You can do a lot with that. So there's any number of things out there that you want to see. So you could do it like a 40-minute stream or a 40-minute discussion if you're Dopamine on just what their thoughts are on character skill trees and progression, and like here's how you unlock stuff. Is it Call of Duty where you're just unlocking bipods and magazines or whatever, or is it no? There's like different abilities that you get to unlock with different trees or whatever. Just like that's a huge. Those are a lot of unknowns, I think.
No, and I would agree because I mean they've the thing is that stuff's been talked about and it's been over a very long period of time. And when I put together my videos on it, it was like a solid hour of content of just talking about this stuff. Like it was 5 different videos. But it needs to, that's great for us at Biomassed, to be able to put that out. But you do at this point start needing to see more of an official, discussion about it. Because I mean, some of that stuff has been a year plus old. It could have changed. It probably has changed. I'd love to see an update to what they're thinking and kind of what they're doing. And, it makes me wonder, where exactly they are in developing those systems. I mean, just looking at kind of what they're hinting at and what they're doing and where the alpha was and some of the technical issues they were having when they were doing the demo at Vegas, I kind of had the feeling like it was maybe a little premature, but that was the day of the event, so that's when they did it. And they probably could have spent, 3-6 more months kind of baking some of the stuff in, adding some of the stuff you talked about, you giving like a clear indication, like here's what's going on, here's why you're doing this. It felt a little premature. Like what they had was solid, but they probably could have fleshed it out more, and they maybe just ran out of time. I'm not sure. But yeah, I'd be curious to see where they are on developing these, because they have been fairly hush-hush about it. And I almost wonder if the reason that Rattati has chosen to release this stuff kind of through Discord is because it's less of an official statement and more of a, hey, I'm just asking you guys what you think, rather than this is how it's going to be. But again, that was a year ago, for some of this stuff. So I'm kind of curious to see where they are in finalizing some of these designs and being able to talk about it more openly,
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on with that, just in terms of kind of the assessment of it. But and I don't want to give them short shrift. I mean, I assume they've probably got a very fleshed out map of where they want to be. Some of this sort of makes me try to understand, like, how long does it really take to build a game, and what are expectations that based on what you're trying to get out of the game. That's one of the things I always find fascinating about this, because I would say 95 or 98, 99% of the people out there that play games, their interaction with a game is really at the point of purchase and then play and then they're done. Whereas I think there's a growing, kind of group of people, probably, if you think about it, like my age bracket, certainly, and then definitely yours, games have been around a lot longer, and we talk, and they stay in development for so long. We talk about them, and it's basically like I used to watch all my friends and myself a little bit, like in the off season of the NFL, talking about nothing but the NFL, like, the draft, like doing all this shit going around the NFL draft and all this other stuff has nothing to do with actually playing a football game. And I feel that we're kind of in that mode a little bit with gaming generally, but I don't know what's healthy either, because I do not know how long it really takes to make a game. What I do know is sometimes it takes a really, really, really long time, either due to complexity, capability of the dev shop, size of the dev shop, whatever, what they're trying to build, how ambitious it is, whatever. We don't really understand any of those variables with CCP. In all honesty, we absolutely don't. So that's kind of where I wonder, like, how fair is it to kind of challenge them on these things sometimes.
Well, and I think that the fact that they moved the project from Shanghai to Iceland like a year and a half ago, the vibe that I've gotten, and just rumor mill, it's that kind of was like, that's when the actual development really started, when they had to move it, and they pretty much started over, because obviously they lost probably a ton of employees in that move, because I mean, it's a big thing to move from Shanghai to Iceland. That's a big life shift, and I imagine a lot of people probably couldn't do that. So you're looking at, okay, you might have some stuff built up, but now you're moving to Iceland. You got to rehire a bunch of people. You've obviously got your partnership with Sumo Digital, which didn't really pop up until around that time. So that involves assembling that team, beginning development. I almost wonder if you really are only seeing this iteration of Project Nova really being from that move, from Iceland up until now, which is, like I said, only like a year and a half or so. So again, I'm like you. I don't know exactly how long it would take to make a game. Obviously, we aren't entirely clear on the resources or what that would even translate to, but it's a little unclear. That's why I'm not so hypercritical. I hear a lot of like, well, I've been working on this for like 5 years. I'm like, your timeline's a little off, buddy. Because the stuff they showed like 2016 in Vegas or at FanFest rather, that was like just a tech demo. It wasn't even really the actual development. They were just recycling assets, and I think that a lot of what you're seeing has been much more recent than it looks like. And adding PvE is also very difficult. It's very time intensive to add PvE. If they're doing a straight PvP game, it'd probably be going a little bit faster. But to build an AI engine is pretty tough. So I'm not really faulting them so much on their progress, because if you look at it from that timeline, it's like year and a half. Games can take a really long time to make. I don't think it's going to take 5 years for Project Nova to be playable, but having it like good to go, released 2 years after they start, is probably not super reasonable. So that's kind of where I'm at personally. But again, a lot of that is kind of speculation on when did they actually start working on this thing.
Yeah, no, that's spot on in terms of your assessment. I like I said, I don't know how long it takes to make a game, but I do know that if you don't have a lot of good people that know how to do it already, it's hard as fuck. This is one of the things where I kind of think CCP, in many ways, one of their biggest problems, and there is also one of their biggest strengths. They overreach a lot, which means they fail a lot. Which is okay in some circles, but it's really tough when you're in a customer-based environment. I'll be really upfront with you. If I could go into the Wayback Machine and give Hilmar like an extra bag of Coke or something like that to help bribe him or whatever, because whatever they spend all that Eve money on, I would have strongly recommended that they put together a core team of trusted CCP agents that go in and sit with basically an actual like a game house that knows how to make the type of game they want, or has made something very close to what they want, or they have some kind of proven capability, and paid them to do it, or like brought them in to do it. But CCP is not into that. They want to have very closed environments, that kind of walled garden kind of feel. And I'll be honest with you, I think that's one of their biggest problems. Like if you had brought in, imagine like like somebody like Rattati, who's got the vision, but now he's working with a like a co-lead, like a co-executive producer that's made these kind of games, or like a shop that's made, like that's done this. I mean, for the record, Vicarious Vision, they put together a lot of Forsaken. That wasn't just Bungie doing that. So this is not new. I mean, a lot of people do this.
Well, and I think that shows because, I mean, obviously they're working with Sumo Digital, and with our interview with their lead designer, Sumo is basically their job as their team is solely the in-match experience of the actual core shooting. In that part was actually really good. And Sumo is, of course, not really known for FPS games, but apparently the people that are actually on the team that are working on it have had at other positions, different companies, a lot of experience with FPS games. So, I think the fact that CCP said, you know what, we tried this, where we tried to put together an FPS game and we pretty much botched the core experience, we need to outsource it. That's worked really well, and that really shows. I mean, it's like I said, from what I experienced in Vegas, it was really solid. So that worked. It's just kind of CCP now layering the stuff on top of the core experience to make it feel like a new Eden game, and that's where they need to do better, I think. So, I gotta give props for its deal. Like, Sumo did a really solid job, especially since, again, as a company, they're not known for FPS games. They have experienced people working on it, which is good. But they did a really solid job. I think we just need to kind of see the other side of it come up now with, the internal stuff from CCP of how do you make this a new Eden game? And that's where they really should be specialized at. I mean, that's their whole business is EVE Online pretty much at this point. So them focusing on that and letting Sumo deal with the actual, core shooting, it's a great idea. It's working well from what I can tell so far. It's just, we need to kind of wrap the whole thing up and make it feel, unique at this point.